favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Okay, pertaining to the business today, any conflicts of interest to the items any chance today? No. There's no confirmation of minutes, so we'll go straight into agenda number 5.1, hearings, deliberations and adoption of the animal control, dog registration and food licensing fees. This morning we have Mr. Andrew Wilson presenting. Good morning, Andrew. How are you?
Morning, Your Worship and Councillors. So today we're here to deliberate, and then also potentially adopt, depending on those hearings and deliberations, the fees and charges for dog registration, dog control, animal control, and food licensing. I'll take the item as read, but as sort of a brief overview, you previously made a resolution to go out and consult on a range of fees and charges for those three matters. Those three matters were consulted on over the last sort of month. We got a range of feedback on the matters, and one of the key trends, I guess, that we saw through those submissions was a large number of people believing that the way the fees are calibrated was too harsh on those people doing the right thing and not harsh enough on those doing the wrong thing. So as a result of that, officers have already made a recommendation to adjust those fees accordingly to reflect some of that feedback and reflect some of the commentary that was also provided by elected members on that exact same matter. So if you look at the revised fees and charges schedule, before we move forward, just to address, there's a minor error in that table that talks about the difference between the revised and the proposed. For the dog, if unregistered, for second or more impounding and after hours impounding fee, that should say $45 with a 29% increase on the revised fee, not 23%. That's the difference between $155 and $200 is 45, not 35. Just to address that matter before we move ahead, to just make sure that that's clear. There's no confusion there. So that was the main feedback on dog registration, dog control, and animal control. You'll notice that the animal control fee matches the impounding fee for first impounding for dogs. That has historically been the approach that council has taken to that impounding fee. If we look at the food licensing fees, the primary thrust we got through there was there are a number of small businesses, new businesses that are not, either well established or are quite small, doing small amounts of turnover. The fees may be costly for those businesses. So some of them will be under the threshold that is set by MPI of 20 events. I think it is. Correct me on that one. 20 events per year set by PI, I believe. MPI. And if they're under that, then they don't have to have a license. If they're over that, they do. We've noted in the report that there will be opportunity over the next year to look at options for a differential pricing regime. So that would include looking at if there's options or how much difference in cost there is between a large commercial kitchen and a small at-home provider. I guess the point to make there is that it is the same paperwork regardless of if the person is a small operator or a large operator. So the only real saving there will be in officers' time actually at the premises, potentially doing the inspection itself. There wouldn't be any real saving in terms of paperwork. It's unfortunately the way the cookie crumbles, pardon the pun. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those. If not, we will move forward into having the people who have come here today to be heard, to speak to their submissions, and then you can ask further questions through deliberations and ask questions of the submitters.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just a comment on that. I get it. It's the same paperwork and it's a one size fits all, and it's not our doing. This is from central government. But that seems to me an inequitable approach, that because central government have imposed a one size fits all, those that are of a smaller size get unduly penalised. And I just find that a little bit difficult. So a difficult pill to swallow. Same analogy, but yeah.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Greenslade.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm not sure if this is the right place to comment about this as we're going into the deliberations, but I read all the submissions and there was one submission that actually stood out, and that was the submission from Cam Speedy, who lives in Heirangi Road, who was commenting on the fact that it's unsafe to keep animals in that street now due to the fact that hens and sheep have all been ravaged by roaming dogs. And I felt truthfully sorry for them. I mean, he's not a personal friend of mine, even though I know who he is. And I thought if we've got a situation like that in Turangi, certainly increasing the fees up so that dog control officers can perhaps get down there and sort out what's clearly an unacceptable situation in that environment.
Maybe do some more comms on is to have people feel more able to approach dog control through the council numbers and ensuring that they've got that information to make those reports as quickly as possible. I do recognise that there is roaming dogs in Turangi. I would argue that we are doing a heck of a lot down there.
I'm not criticising.
And-
I'm
no,
not
no,
criticising
no,
you at all, no.
But the issue is a community one, and that's where we've got to get people on board to.
It was just very much the case of his submission,
Yeah.
which I read, and I felt quite disturbed at the end of his submission, which is why I pointed that out. I'm pretty there other people did comment, but he was very clear on what had happened to him, and I thought, this is dreadful, absolutely, and anything that you can do down here. I personally will support you in any way and encouraging people, and I'm sure Councillor Fletcher the same, encouraging people to reach out and actually ask for help and report and not let an unsatisfactory situation like this continue.
100%.
Mm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, first submitter up. Thanks, thank you, Ross. First submitter up, we have Rob Elvin. Submitter number 67. Morning, Rob.
Morning, people. Thank you for allowing me to come here and have my say. One comment I would like to say to the gentleman over there, I didn't catch your name.
Right there.
Councillor Taylor, I liked your comment about the idea of one size fits all. Bloody ridiculous, I'm sorry. So I thank you for that comment because it also applies to what I'm about to say. I've been a resident here in Taupo for 50 years. Came from a lovely place called Tauranga to a cold place like Taupo, and I've never really left because it's beautiful down here. Throughout the last 40 years, my wife and I have owned dogs. Right? We've owned lap dogs. You know, the little Bichon Frise, miniature Chihuahuas, those sort of things. They were owned because they were companion dogs and lovely to look after. Ever since we purchased our first dog, they were neutered, they were microchipped, they were registered, they were put behind secure fencing to make sure, not that they couldn't get out, that the other bigger dogs couldn't get in. We also had a slight discount for that service. Fenced in, get permission to be a discounted cost. And that was nice, but it didn't reflect what we had to pay compared to what others had to pay. $10 or $15 increase, I have to say, is not a huge amount. So I'm not too worried about the cost. What I'm concerned about is that the owners, like myself, of a small dog, having to pay the same cost as the owners of a Rottweiler or a German Shepherd or any other such large dog. That would probably cause to the council and our dog rangers probably a little bit more problems than my Bichon Frise running out the gate and mauling a chicken or mauling another Rottweiler. You know, it's unlikely that's to happen. So my concern is that why are people with lap dogs, who in general are going to be an older group because they're companion dogs, they're well looked after and they're treated like a child. You know, my dog is a grandchild and she sleeps with me. Right? Because she's a companion dog. I don't believe that the rating system is fair and it should be more scaled based on size of dog, location, what problems these different dogs may cause for the council in terms of that. Roaming dogs, I agree, Turangi's bad. Where I live out in Wairakei Village, they are there, but they're not as bad. But a lot of them are unregistered. They cause more problems than anything else. And, you know, I just feel that we are the ones who are doing the right thing, but we're getting a slap on the hand and having to pay for the people who are doing nothing. Okay? And I feel for these small business owners who are in the same boat here, slapped with one blanket cost when they don't really deserve it. So my appeal to the council is maybe look at scale rather than just say, right, every dog is this price and every working dog is that price and every. I think that would be a more equitable position to be in. Okay, so it's not the money, it's just looking at trying to make it fair to all owners. All right. Thank you for your time. If you've got any questions, happy to answer.
Any questions?
Just point of clarification. Thank you, Councillor Greenslade.
You think we should do it like insurance? So sort of, you know, no claims bonus type of situation.
To be fair, I was an insurance broker for 26 years here in Taupo. So yeah, that's not a silly idea. But also in insurance, you have a different scale based on age. You know? So the older you are, the more you're paid because it was get closer to the time they may have to pay out. So yeah, something like that may be an idea. And the name Greenslade, my wife's name was Greenslade.
Oh, really?
So I'm curious to know that you may be related. Somehow.
Sorry, Your Honour.
You can't know about it. Councillor Greenslade is now out of the deliberation.
Okay, sorry about that. Conflict of interest.
Sorry about that.
And on that note too, Rob, we're very sorry to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Done an amazing job of guides over the field guides and things over the years. So just please to the family.
Appreciate that. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, just a comment, as a previous dog owner and bike postie who encountered many dogs, I found, I mean, the compliance people would know. I have a hunch you're right about the big dog, it's a small dog thing, but the ones that always got me with the small dogs, I took for granted. Just saying.
So you went to pat them and they probably gave you a little nip.
Yeah, oh, they'd come up to me and act all friendly, and then they'd nip me on the ankle or something. So the big ones would stay clear, you know, I'd chase them off.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Oh, one more quick clarification.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Robin. And it is really frustrating because behind every time and out of the box thinking is really good and something we really appreciate, because every time you look at different things like that, you know, then you have to employ more people and whatnot. So there's a sort of a balance, and it's a bit like the balance in that dog owners only actually pay 35% of what the actual cost is. As a non-dog owner, I pay 75% of dog registration fees in my rates, which I don't mind because I'm part of a community. But I just want to thank you for clarifying how we could probably do something different and differential when we're all picking up the tab at the end of the day.
Can I make a comment just based on the word rates there? Once you open the door. Your rates is another issue because I pay rates on my house, and as you just mentioned, there's a cost in there to cover the extra amount that isn't paid by the owner of the dog. But I also pay costs for things that we don't get where I live. Sewage, for instance, I've still got to pay for an emptying of a septic tank. Yet I'm paying a cost in my rates for sewage collection, you know, which is standard for everybody. So I'm getting a double whammy there, and now I'm getting a double whammy on the dogs. So it's just, you know, trying to find a balance is what I'm looking at asking. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for your time, folks. Hope you have a good day.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. The process from there, we'll be deliberating at some stage and we'll be in touch. Cool. Okay, next submitter we have 103 Alexandra Walters. How are you?
Good.
Good.
So I always get grumpy when I reply to these things online, so I'll just say that. I'm grateful that there is a mechanism to do it. I think that my core comment is that I've worked for regional councils I've worked for the Department of Conservation. I've sat in some other government positions and helped deliver a lot of portfolios that you have delivered or similar. What I think from my view is that we're going through a time when the official cash rate is up to pull inflation down. And yes, there are increased costs, but I do think that we have to look at how can you raise certain fees disproportionately when every other part of our economy is been trying to sit it down. So I think that I don't have an issue so much that you need to increase fees. I just think that they need to be in relationship to all the other aspects of our economy. Some of these fees are up there 49, 50%, 100% increases. I think that you need to, if you have to do it incrementally over time, keep them at a rate that's not going to flare on any aspect of our economy or individuals. When our properties were revalued 2 years ago now, most properties saw an increase in rates of anywhere from 20 to 60% in the valuations of their properties. So therefore, the cash flow of the council has increased. I'm not saying that there might not have been lag. I'm not saying that there's not deferred maintenance. I'm not saying that those issues don't exist. They do exist. But you also have a huge amount of businesses and across this and just families and households trying to recover from COVID. Some people have lost everything. So if these people are stepping back into the economy, whether they're a dog owner or they're a small business or a larger business, I think that whatever decisions are made by the councils has to be in step with what is the national economic situation. I think you need to keep in that 8 to 10% range if you need to increase fees. And if you have to do it in such a way, how can that be redistributed? There's a lot of capital works going on within the region at this time. Some of those capital works, yes, I think they increase the attractiveness to certain aspects of the community, but do they benefit the whole community across the bay? Do they the people out of Oranui, the traffic congestion at the corner of Oihapi and Whangamata Road, because of there's increases across our whole out at Whareawaka, the Napier Tapo turnoff. There are major infrastructure issues. I'm not saying that they don't have to be addressed. I'm not saying that all of these things, to me, the whole thing is interconnected. I think that my experience in working in the government sector is that a lot of attention is paid to the voices of consultants and not to the voices of the people who actually have to live their day-to-day lives and come up with the money and actually have the flow of life within this community. So it would be my request to pay attention to the comment that you took on. I know Cam Speedy. I worked with him. I'm a dog owner. I have all of these issues. My biggest concerns at the moment are things like PACs because they present a public threat in every way. I mean, if that's a situation when you need to hire outside contractors a couple of times a year to assist our dog control people, go for it. Do stuff that delivers things with high outcomes and speed. So for me, on my comments in both the fees, I mean, I'm a small business owner. I have to pay fees to MPI because I do honey. So my fees are about every 20 minutes. I get another fee from somebody that I have to pay to regulate myself in every aspect of my business. So what I'm sharing is that I think everything has to be considered proportionately. If the official cash rate is going to stay where it is, homeowners are hurting. You cannot sell your property for the GV that it currently has. Okay. So because you have organizations that say, okay, your current, government valuation on your property is X, but an organization that's owned offshore like One Roof can say that across the whole district, your property's worth 3 to 5% less than that, or 30% less, or 10%. So keep those things in mind when you're making these fee decisions. It's really important. And that's my submission to you guys, because it affects everything. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sandra, a couple of questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Clarification. Thank
Yep.
you, Councillor Taylor.
Thanks. Thank you. They keenly aware of the monetary situation and of the increases. Just for my own clarification, I get it. You want us to look at a a lower and what I'm looking for, consistent level of increase.
Yes.
What we have done in terms of, in response to a lot of other submissions, is increased the fees for those who simply refuse to behave themselves or have aberrant dogs. Would you be opposed to us increasing those fees beyond the level you're suggesting? Or would you be in agreement with that?
So for me, there are exceptions to every rule.
Yeah.
And like my biggest pet peeve nationally at the moment is the number of dogs being stolen for for fighting dogs bait. It's rife through the country. So if that was discovered in our area, I would want you to throw everything you could at them. Okay. The same, and I think that they're always, like the gentleman before said, you know, I do believe, you know, a dog over 10 years old, if it makes it that far, well done. I think there should be a cease and fees unless it's a dangerous dog. If the animal's never had an issue and it's 10 years old and it's riddled with arthritis and wandering around, you know, especially big dogs, most of them, the average age of an older dog is 11 or 12 if it's good, right? So perhaps there are some you know, some rewards that could be created that would benefit the owners that do comply. But for those that are breaking the rules, I mean, I get questions around, you know, how to heal packs of, you know, pig dogs that are ripped up, you know, and they're stitching them up at home. I mean, I would know that speaking to members of the public, and I speak to a lot of the public, you know, 10 or 12 of those dogs are probably not registered. These people are keeping huge numbers of dogs that are off the radars, that are kept out the back, but they're driving around in town with these dogs all in their vehicles. I mean, I would support a dog control person being able to inspect dogs that are driving around in trucks. Make sure they're chipped, make sure they're licensed, because I would suspect you would find a lot of them are not. So I think, yes, proportionately for that fringe area that's causing huge damage to the community at large. You know, if your dogs are out being roamed, find the owners. Make it a separate penalty. You know, because increasing the dog fees across the board is, but maybe go after, target these things to the people that are committing the wrongs. You know? I mean, that's, you know, I'm sorry, I'm trying to cover a lot of bases for your question, but yeah, that's.
No, the basis of my question was those who don't behave,
Yep.
are seeking to increase the fees and make them pay more of their share. Those who do comply with the rules, we're seeking to reduce the cost.
Yep.
That's the intent.
And I think find really positive mechanisms to do that. But
Cool. Thank you.
overall, I'd like you to keep it within the affordability of our communities. Okay? Thank you. Sorry?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for taking the time for your submission and coming in today. Just to clarify, from your submission, and you talk about an extraordinary amount of TDC income being dumped into the ISA of the building.
Yep. I don't
Aware
like the
that it's
building.
not actually a council building, that we're going to be leasing offices in that building.
I actually have my complexities around all of that and the way that the entire process is undertaken, which I'm extremely familiar with. I object to the entire thing.
Okay, I just
Okay,
wanted
I mean,
to.
full stop.
Yeah, it's not- yeah.
Full stop from top to
We will
bottom.
be tenants in the building. It's not a
That's
council
fine.
building.
But yeah, but
Just to
I,
clarify. Yeah.
but once again, from my view and from my understanding of the processes, and I did participate in that process, is that I go back to my comment that I would like more of the voices of the people who live in this community and not consultants taken with a higher weighting. And that's what I mean with that. Yeah, I think that we have to pay attention to the people that come and sit here and that make these submissions and not necessarily to consultants. Because my experiences in the past with working in government agencies, other councils, and ones that affect these communities, is that too much attention has been paid to consultants. Okay? And I think some of the outcomes that you have are the result of that.
Oh, yeah, well, actually, if we'd gone with community consensus, we would have built the building ourselves, so.
Yes,
but
I know. I
disagree.
understand that.
We'll agree to disagree on that.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's perfect. Yeah, no, awesome.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for
Thank
your time, Alexandra. Really appreciate
Is it all right? I have another appointment. Will you be offended if I leave now?
it. No.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
As a result of the deliberation that we outcome on today's.
Oh, no, and I value you all being here. Thank you. You're lovely. Cheers.
Okay.
Thanks, Ken.
Submitter 141, Gary Hudson from the Taupō Dog Training Club. Gary, come forward. Gary?
So good morning all. Thank you for the opportunity to address the meeting on behalf of the Taupō Dog Training Club regarding the proposed dog registration fee increases. I would like to expand on the information presented earlier in our club submission and the recognition sought by the club for those owners who have undertaken extra training with their dog to gain a National Canine Good Citizen qualification. Firstly, some points, an expansion on the CGC or the Canine Good Citizen program. This program originated in the United States in 1989, and it has now spread around the world. Every continent has got countries that actually have a CGC program running, sometimes with different names, but it's essentially the same. The aim of the CGC program is to promote responsible dog ownership by teaching owners to train their dog for everyday life situations. So what the dog gets up to or experiences out in the world is not a traumatic event for them, and they can behave themselves. The program is open to both purebred and crossbred dogs of any age. We recently had a dog go through an assessment at the club, 11 years old and pass. So age is not an issue for the dogs. Owners do not have to be members of Dogs New Zealand or any dog training club. It's open to anybody that owns a dog. Dogs that provide CGC training courses may require owners to become members of the club, and that's the case in Taupō. We provide CGC training, and we ask people that want to undertake the training to become members, but they don't have to. A person does not have to. They can actually train their own dog and just do the assessments. Progress through the CGC program is by passing an assessment for each level. And our earlier submission does point out some information on the levels of CGC. Owners must achieve a pass mark in every exercise in the assessment. There is a fee for owners to undertake assessments. This is set by Dogs New Zealand. We have a small admin fee on top of that because we give them ribbons as part of for those that pass for the assessment. Successful owners are issued with a Dogs New Zealand CGC certificate for each level that they pass, and details of their dog are entered into a national database. The dogs actually get a title behind them, reflecting what level of assessment they've passed. So you could have dogs FIDO, CGC, F for foundation, if they pass the foundation. Second point I'd like to mention is CGC at the Taupō Dog Training Club. We have about 80 new members a year join the club to undertake basic dog training classes. For those who pass the basic training class, one of their options is to undertake CGC training. And CGC training classes are held for each level of CGC. With the CGC classes, it generally takes 3 months before a dog is ready to undertake an assessment at the next level. Even after the training, success in an assessment is not guaranteed. The dog only has to fail one exercise to fail the whole assessment. The number of dogs in Taupō achieving CGC qualifications each year varies, but it's generally about 8 to 10 dogs a year. On average, it will take a minimum of a year before a dog will achieve CGC Gold level status, which is the highest one. Some dogs, and we have experienced this, some dogs will take a year before they even pass the CGC foundation, the basic ones.
In this time, the owner will have invested many hours of training and in the vicinity of $200 in training fees and assessment charges through the 4 CGC levels. If a dog is slow in progressing, it's going to be even more if they have to reset assessments. Final point for us is the registration fee for CGC Gold dogs. The club considers that the dedication shown by these owners and integrated dog ownership responsibilities should be recognised by a special category of dog registration fee. The registration fee should be a saving on the normal fee that acknowledges the owner's efforts, make them feel that it's all been worthwhile, and provides an incentive for more dog owners in Taupō to undertake the CGC program and become responsible dog owners. Looking at the revised proposed fees for dog registration, it is considered that the registration fee for a CGC Gold qualified dog should be the same as that allowed for a responsible owner classification. And if I've read the graph right, it's $75. This level of fee is considered justified as the responsible owner classification looks only at dog safe property aspects and does not take into account the welfare and training of the dog itself. The reduced fee for CGC Gold dogs should apply regardless of whether the dog is desexed or not, and it should also not require an application fee. The owner can produce a Dogs New Zealand CGC certificate to prove the qualification of their dog. Essentially, that's the basis of our submission and justification for what we would like the Taupō Council to consider and approve the reduced fee for CGC Gold dogs. Having heard the comments of the previous 2 speakers, if I may add an aside on my personal experience of considerable years of training dogs, more than I like to admit sometimes, I feel that part of the problem is it's too easy to own a dog in New Zealand. People take it as a right to own a dog without being willing to accept the responsibilities that go with owning a dog. It's not just in New Zealand. If we lived in Australia for a while, it's the same over there. Although their penalties are harsher, much harsher for transgressions with dogs. They have the same problems. But it's a case of educating people that if they want to have a dog, they have to accept responsibility for it. And penalties if they do not. Anyway, that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions.
Yeah. Any question or clarification? Councillor Campbell.
Just a question, resitting. I mean, a dog might do this at year 2 or 3. Is it? Do they? Is there any? I mean, when say what's saying that they're going to be maintained, behave the rest of their life?
Once the dog does get to gold level, there are no further assessments. However, if there is any reported transgression by the dog, they can have that qualification status taken off them. Generally, I think that most dog owners that do get their dogs through CGC Gold level are responsible and will maintain their dog to that level. But there is the avenue that if anything does happen, the dog does get reported and there's an issue with it, they can actually have that taken off them.
Councillor Westman.
It's very interesting. Thanks very much. Do you know if there are any other councils in New Zealand that give a discount for dog owners with that registration status?
Yes, there are. What they actually give, I can't find out. I haven't been able to find out in the interim. But there are councils down in Wellington region that do give a discount and include CGC Gold qualified dogs as part of their responsible owner program, so they're already in that. There's a council in Waikato, somewhere else in Waikato that I can't track down. It's very piecemeal at the moment, I must admit. The CGC team in Dogs New Zealand are taking it on as a project to have a national approach across all local authorities. But this is work in progress, and at the moment it's being left to each local authority determine, and like some places don't have any dog training facilities, so they got no one to speak on their behalf. So we're speaking for the Waikato, sorry, for Taupō dog owners.
Thank you.
Well, just this certificate, I mean, is it, what does give a ticket to dog owners? If you get this, does it mean, does it give you access to anything else?
As far as Dogs New Zealand is concerned, no.
I mean,
It
okay.
gives you a very nice certificate.
Yeah.
I've got one for one of our dogs at home, signed, and it's all formal Dogs New Zealand. Actually got 4 certificates. You get one for each way, each level as you go through. All signed by the head of Dogs New Zealand, but and a ribbon. Apart from that, you just get the approval to use their title behind the name on their registration.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate your submission. Okay, Andrew, what's the best way to go from here? Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Want to go through the submissions, or you've sort of.
So obviously you've heard what the submitters had to say today. I'll just note on some of those submissions. The gentleman raised around differential pricings for different types of dogs. That's not able to be done under the Act. As some of you will be aware, you previously had a discounted fee for rural dog other. So that was non-working dogs that lived in the rural environment. That's actually against the Act. You cannot do that. You can't give discounts outside of what's prescribed for in the Act to the dog, but we can give discounts based on the owner. So responsible dog owner, for example, discounts for D6 dogs. Those things are allowed for under the Act. So the gentleman raising around the the canine good citizen programs, for example, that's something that you could consider. However, discounts based on type of dog are not able to be done under the Act, other than for working dogs or non-working dogs.
Thanks.
Through the chair, obviously, without oversimplifying, it's obviously I've written down differentiating between dog categories equals extra time for officers, which means OPEX increases equals increase in rates.
If you need, I believe you will take the just area around the world. Yeah. Around the world, but that's very cool. Do you want? Yeah. And then
That's while the deputy chair's taking the chair. Andrew, so just to clear it in my mind, so in regards to Mr. Houghton around trained certified dogs, we can't actually have a separate category for them. And also just like the gold card or people over 65, I mean, we have a differential when it comes to using different community facilities. So we can't actually use that mechanism either under the Act.
For the gold card, you absolutely can. There are other authorities that provide discounts to people on pensions, all based on an age threshold. For example, Rotorua, basically, if the registered owner of the dog is over 65, they automatically receive about $10 a year discount, I believe. So that is something that you can do. And in terms of using the Canine Good Citizen program as an indicator of responsible dog ownership, you could associate our current responsible dog owner fee. It could be a responsible dog owner fee, and the criteria for getting that thing could either be you get the assessment that's done by the team where they have to go view your property, they do all the inspection, you pay an application fee, or have Canine Good Citizen qualification, but with a caveat of that on our system, you do not have any black marks next to your name, i.e. your dog has not been impounded for roaming, which is effectively would be the same criteria as what our rural, to get responsible dog owner status in the rural environment, which is just about your dog doesn't have black marks next to its name for roaming, for aggression, for anything like that. So it's possible for you to do that. Obviously, the issue being with Canine Good Citizen is it's a program outside of TDC, administered, I believe, by Purina in New Zealand, and Dogs New Zealand work together on this program and having a database. So the officers would have to receive the certificates and then check those certificates are valid, and check and also regularly check to see whether they've been revoked or not. Because there's no real, you could try and say that the person is giving a false disclosure under the Dog Control Act, but I don't know whether that would fly if you tried to prosecute someone for that.
And
So it'd be very difficult for
sorry,
enforcement.
I'm just trying to clarify some things in my mind. I'm certainly not indicating to our wonderful staff at the back room that I want to make their lives living dog hell. But and the other point is with therapy dogs, the likes of Mr. Alvin, who presented this morning, where he has a very small companion dog, is there an opportunity for people with these very small companion dogs to go through the process to see if they somehow can just be justified as therapy dogs? I mean, I know that's not up to us.
That would be up to a registered psychiatrist, psychologist to determine that that animal is a genuine, emotional support animal.
Yeah,
And
so
it's not just, because arguably speaking,
GP. Okay, so I'm just wondering in our responses to submitters along those lines that we could perhaps suggest that they try that avenue.
Yeah, so if the person goes to their GP, they can get the GP to sign off that that animal is a genuine support animal. Obviously, the catch being is, to some extent, everyone would say that their animal is a support animal.
Well,
And so we've got those criteria that are then able to be.
I completely understand. I'm just wondering if there is is something we can provide in the submission as another avenue for them to try to help alleviate why.
So those animals currently don't pay a fee at all.
That's
fee is
correct.
like,
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Disability assist dogs, I believe, is you could capture that there's certain criteria for disability assist dogs, which is specified in the Act, and if they meet that criteria, then they can apply for that fee discount.
I'll come in a second.
That's okay. That was my question.
So I had a question. I'll come in a second, Councillor Campbell. So that was part of the question asked. I'm just looking at the proposed fees chart here. You've got pet therapy dog in the brackets as approved by council officers. So that implies to me there is a degree of wriggle room, for want of a better way of putting it. But I'm hearing the answer here from Jess, it has to be GP or as defined in the Act or whatever. So as approved by council officers is basically you comply with what the statute says rather than there is a discretion.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we need to change the wording, because that implies to me that we have a degree of discretion, whereas we don't. We need to apply what is set within the rules. Yeah. So I'm a bit pedantic on that, but I think it's important we do that.
That was why I asked.
Yeah, thank you. So the question from Warwick was, is it worth checking what the criteria is? Yeah. So the other question I had in terms of the responsible owner classification and the submission we've just heard, I actually found quite compelling. Does that qualification or that kind of training lend itself towards us invoking the responsible owner classification?
through the chair, you could choose to use that as an indicator of someone being.
Probably going to
responsible.
suggest that we choose to do that, because that to me sounded like an eminently sensible approach to this. Anyway, but that's for the deliberation we have shortly.
Through the chair, if I could just point out though that to have that certificate, there is a significant cost to actually achieve that. So there will be some current responsible dog owners that will then have to go through a program which is an additional cost to then achieve responsible dog owners. So I guess it's just pointing it out to the committee that there is a cost associated to it, and there also is a officer time that will have to be taken into consideration if we are to expand our responsible dog ownership criteria to accommodate.
No, but my suggestion will be not instead of, but as well as. Not replacing it with the qualification, but adding that to the list of factors that we would consider as being what we would apportion a responsible owner classification to. That's all I'm suggesting, but. Councillor Campbell.
Oh yeah, just one off of that, perhaps I missed it, but how does, if you're a dog owner, how do you get yourself classified as a responsible dog owner?
Through the chair, so you submit an application through council's portal, and as that application, depending on where you're located, if that's in the rural or the residential environment, there's a set of criteria you must meet. One of those being that your animals don't have a black mark next to their record, so you don't have a black mark next to your record for your animals roaming and things like that. And then that in the urban environment, that there is a criteria around access to property and space where your dog is. So, for example, if your dog is outside in a yard, there has to be a way to access the property without having to go through the area where the dog is, for example. Those are the kinds of criteria you're looking at. So it's around either the dog is in a fenced off yard, which can be accessed without someone having to walk through it to get into the house, or the dog that lives inside of the house.
No, okay.
And there's also rules around kenneling and having a kennel and things like that. So there are a range of factors that are assessed.
No, on that certificate thing, I mean, that could be an additional to those like, rather than flunking on every owner has to do that course to get the responsible dog owner.
Which is exactly what I said a minute ago, but yes.
Yeah. But my second question about working dogs, I'm just interested. What's stopping me living in urban Taupo saying I've got a working dog and walking the streets? Do they not get a registration tag at all?
Working dogs are registered, and the Act prescribes what meets the definition of a working dog. It's a dog that's principally kept for the purposes of herding animals.
No,
or stock.
okay.
So if you did live in the urban environment and you had a dog, but you commuted to the farm every day and that dog worked, you may actually meet the definition. However, that dog's primary purpose must be to work.
No, okay. And my other question, one of the submitters did point out this microchipping business, the value of it. And I encountered this once with my own dog. For example, if my dog got lost in another district and they found him, they wouldn't, the microchip, I think I'm recalling this right, the information, because it's a different district, they don't keep the information, microchip information from district to district. Is that, do you know much about that? Or?
Through the chair, the microchip information goes into a national dog database, which is accessible to all animal control officers throughout New Zealand. So it's actually a good tool to be able to relocate dogs back to their owners, and there have been examples of that where dogs have been stolen, found in different districts, and then repatriated.
Oh, okay. I must have got that wrong. No, that's all right. And the last. Oh yeah. One of the submitters did raise. Are we planning on any increased facilities for dogs as part of this long-term plan thing? Increased
the
walking.
Long-term plan question. This is a fees and charges conversation today. So it's a legitimate question, but it's probably not for today's conversation.
No, I suppose it's relating to if I'm paying more, what am I going to get something more for it? I suppose that's the context of the question.
Whether we increase facilities, that would be a long-term plan conversation. And this would feed into that, but we're not making a decision or even debating whether or not we're going to build any infrastructure today. Councillor, I shared with you a question.
Yeah, I did. Are there allowances for hardship
for people who want to be responsible dog owners but are, I guess, financially challenged?
My understanding is that there's some provisions in there for hardship, so officers can make a determination based on someone's situation if there's actual hardship. I can double check what clauses that pertains to.
I would just like to know if we make it known to people that that is there, if it's an offer of assistance to make sure people are registering and perhaps working towards responsible dog ownership and things like that. They probably want to go out and do all of these things but can't afford it. So I'm just wondering if there's a hardship consideration and how easy it is to access for our dog owners.
Not sure if people have a question there.
I'm just wondering if there is something here.
I'll answer that through the chair. There is actually a section, section 39, subsection 3, which allows officers by discretion to reduce or remit or discount fees depending on hardship or particular circumstances that they're presented with. And I believe that's an officer delegation. Yes.
So whether or not that's made public and how we do that, that's a comms issue, not a fees and charges issue. And that's something at an operational level can be done after we have this conversation. It's a legitimate point, but not necessarily something we can influence in the context of this discussion.
Yeah, thanks. I think just in general conversation, a lot of the communication with the dog officers, whatever the situation is, obviously rules are the rules, but obviously good communication, as we're seeing through our dog activities, as the results here that sometimes you can accommodate a hardship or some situation that somebody's finds itself in. So it's all about communication.
Thank you. Andrew, what percentage of our dog owners are responsible dog owners under this classification?
Through the chair, I don't have the answer to that one. One of the compliance team may answer. But my understanding is that currently we're going through a bit of a system rework with the actual back end systems for a lot of our processes. So currently data is quite difficult to pull out at this time. So apologies, we can't answer that one.
I think that the thought behind the question was really, is it a popular thing for people to do, and are they encouraged to do it, and are we encouraging people to do it, is where I was going with that question. Yeah.
I suspect, and purely anecdotally, I look at the number of matters that come before the Dog Control Committee and how infrequently we have needed to convene, the high end at least of aberrant dog owners is minimal. The vast majority of dog owners in this district are actually good people looking after good animals in the right way. That would be my anecdotal reflection based on what comes across my desk. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to reference back to Rob's presentation. I thought that was great and a great insight into asking the question at least around big dogs versus small dogs and the type of impact they have on our community. Do we have any statistics on the types of dogs that are attacking? I don't want us to assume anything, as much as you look at a big dog and often terrified, sometimes they're the most beautiful, dogs versus little terriers, much like Duncan's example, sometimes to bite your arm off. So, I just wondered if there were any statistics more on to help provide a better picture after Rob's presentation today, but also as a carry on. I just wanted to acknowledge Gary as well. I'm really interested to see if this qualification could get recognised nationally. As in all councils across the country recognise that qualification is something that should be nationally recognised and something that should be adopted. It was a great question by Yvonne. It should be adopted by all councils across the country. So, yeah. But anyway, back to the statistics question.
So, sorry, through the chair, we don't have any statistics around dog attacks on types of dogs, but anecdotally, it's about 50-50, whether it's a big dog or a little dog. Little dogs can be just as aggressive as big dogs sometimes, as we all know. So, it's definitely.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much for all the questions. Well, I guess we'll move into formal deliberations on what you have heard and what has been also submitted to you through the submission process, and deciding on whether or not officers have, with the proposed revisions, have struck the right balance, or whether you would like to make further changes and adopt subject to those changes.
So I guess we're sitting on the table, if you go to page 8 of the agenda, the whole purpose of the submissions and the deliberations we've had this morning is focused on the level of fees and the changes initially that went out to consultation and the amendments to that as a result of submissions that have come in. And this is now our discussion on this. Happy to go through either line by line or by exception those that wish to address a particular fee recommendation to us.
Well, I mean, I like the sound of gold. I like the sound of it. Gold card discounts and classification of that certificate for automatically going classified as responsible dog owner. I like the sound of that. That means less money we get, of course. Well, actually, a question. Actually, does that, if we went with that, does that mean we need to tinker with the other dollar amounts as well?
So the things to bear in mind, there is a balancing act here between the finance and revenue policy, which we've already discussed, and whatever we take off of this goes on to rates. So at the end of the day, there is a circle, and all we're deciding now is which proportion of that circle goes to dog owners and which proportion goes to the general rate. So at the end of the day, in this conversation, all of it needs to be paid for. If, for example, as some of the submitters have suggested, we reduce level of service, that's a long-term plan conversation, which we'll have later in the year. So the conversation for today, so it's a legitimate question and proposal, but again, anything we take out of this has to go somewhere else. And we need to be mindful of how far we stray from our revenue and finance policy, because some of the suggestions already in the movement, as we've seen previously, are still outside of that policy. And the reason for that is, if we're to adopt the policy in total, from my understanding of what I've read, is that the fee jump would be untenable. So Nick and Jess, have I got that right there?
Yeah, through the chair to that point, you recently approved, subject to Audit New Zealand review, a revenue and financing policy. That revenue and financing policy placed an additional 0 to 10% of the cost of dog registration and animal control onto the general rate. That is to make up for the fact that the current split between fees and charges, UAGC, and the proposal was not going to be sufficient to make up those policy bands. So that 0 to 10% is where you're going to find the, I believe, if I recall off the top of my head, it's about a 6% discrepancy between the two numbers based on the old policy or the current policy, and that 0 to 10% is going to capture that little bit that's outside of the existing bands to make sure that there is that the policy and what we're proposing are in cooey with each other based on our Section 80 considerations. However, playing with the fees more, shifting them dramatically up or down, may then put us outside of the approved policy bands. And without doing financial modelling on that, I cannot tell you if you decide today to make significant changes, how far outside of those bands would be. But we would potentially be back in a place where we're looking at Section 80 considerations again and making a decision that is possibly inconsistent with an existing policy, or it is currently inconsistent with the existing policy, but may not be inconsistent with the future policy. It's a bit of a convoluted process because of the nature of LTP this year, unfortunately.
I get it, thank you. And that's a nice segue into my next question, hang on, just wait. At the risk of throwing you or the policy team under the bus here, if we debate some of these line items and decide that we want to make significant things, I need you, if that's not too hard a question, to say, actually, you are straying way outside of what we've already agreed and sent to audit. So we need that reality check in terms of that and a discussion here, because we can discuss and decide a whole range of things, but if we've already made a decision, which would then make that null and void, I'm pretty sure our collective memory may or may not go to that. We need that advice, yeah? Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah.
Cool, sorry, who?
Oh, yeah, and just to add to that, just to clarify, for example, I like the idea of discounts to responsible owners and older people, but that's a financial issue. But I mean, you can't just keep on taking. And the question is, well, maybe we put on a little bit more onto dangerous dogs, impounding fees. We ramp that up a bit more to compensate. I mean, that's just where I'm heading. Yeah.
Through the chair, officers have already recommended some substantial increases to those impounding fees in the revised fee schedule. And the risk you run with increasing impounding fees too high is that then those owners of those animals will not pay the impounding fee. Then we must house the animal and either try to look to rehome them or put the animal down, which obviously incurs a cost either way. So we want it to be finding the right balance between a penalty for someone who's done something wrong, but also affordable enough that those people will pay to release that animal and it can go home.
So we've got Rachel, Anna.
Can I switch to food licensing for a minute? Because we also have to deal with that. And I read Jane Gamble's submission here about making cakes. My question is that 20 cake limit legislated or is that our stipulation?
The limit is set by MPI.
Yeah. And so just going back to what the deputy mayor was just trying to clarify, well, did a good job clarifying before, sorry. I feel like we're in a bit of a perfect storm with are we horse before cart or cart before horse, and where we sit with our draft LGP, which is sitting with audit versus, and I also quite like the officer's recommendation of that, you know, we need to look at this perhaps for next year as to differentials. And I also think Mr. Houghton had some really good points about dog owners taking self-responsibility, and regardless of what it costs, it is what it is. It's nothing to do with us. But if there's work going on at national level, we need to find out what that is rather than reinvent the wheel. So I feel like we're in this space. For me, as far as the dog fees and what goes, it is what it is, but there is quite a bit of work that could be done to perhaps make it fair and a bit more understandable in the long term, based on what might be happening nationally and what this government might change, because we all know that the food registration fees and like the waste minimisation stuff of food bins are all overhangs of things that were brought in by the previous government. We don't know what we don't know. So that's where I sit on the dog fee.
Through the chair in the paper, we outlined that, particularly in regard to discounts for those on fixed incomes or gold card holders, that we would probably need some time to actually work through that and have a look at what the impact of that would be, based on, you know, anecdotally or based on demographics of our district. We would suspect that there are a large number of people who are in the category of being able to have a gold card or a pensioner who would be eligible for a discount. So that discount amount based on age or based on gold card status may actually be quite significant and may have a significant impact on the revenue line. And without at this stage in the process to try and get finance to run that modelling in time to set these fees before financial year begins, I don't believe would be practical.
So can I just say, we have to, on a practical level, roll dog registrations on the 29th of May, so people can pay by the 1st of July. So whatever we do for this year is they're a long way down the track. So in terms of that work that you talked about around discounting and etc., my thought would be that it won't be for the 24-25 year, and then we can look at it for next year when we have this conversation. Because we bring dog charges to you every year, so we can have this conversation next year once we've done a little bit of work on it. And I would include the canine good citizen conversation in that one as well, especially if there's some national work going on under that. So we need to be able to do some research into what's happening with other councils that use that as well, because obviously it would have, in my head, I'm going that may have quite an impact on the team's work of being able to enforce it. And regardless, our responsible for I would imagine that the people that have the canine good citizen qualification are also responsible dog owners anyway. They have houses, etc. They're good people.
Thanks for that, Jess. And just reflecting on the tenure of some of the submissions, so a good number of the submissions we've had, there are some matters that need a fair bit of work, and I think there's some opportunities for us to be innovative, and creative is not quite the right word, innovative, I'll leave it at that, around how we apply discounts to those who are actually showing that they are responsible and doing the right thing, particularly in terms of the conversation we had from the dog. Karen, you had a question?
Well, probably not just comment. And that was just around, I think, bringing back to what you were saying, Kevin, around anecdotally speaking, I think for the most part, our community do house very responsible dog owners. And, you know, I often think of the dogs that are quite mischievous. They've got great dog owners, but the dog themselves can be quite mischievous. And I remember a family dog that we dubbed affectionately Houdini, who could ultimately get out of any encasing that we put her in. Even the house was able to open windows. So you know, yeah, incredibly smart, mischievous dog. But again, they got the red marks against their name, and unfortunately couldn't be a responsible, you know, dog owner. So I'm just mindful of those people who I believe make up quite a significant part of our community that we need to be mindful of in making these types of decisions too. So,
and a few.
Oh, yeah, if I can just, the only thing that I've sort of got a slight bugbear about is we keep talking about discounts. I mean, we've already get a bad rap that we charge through the nose and we're ripping people off as it is. We are actually talking about differential based on dog, like, owner responsibility or age category or and whatever else. I mean, we can't just discount for the sake of it because there's a sale on whatever. I just think we just need to be careful with that, because I mean, we don't want people to pay high rates. We're doing what we can to keep them as low as possible, but discounts, I think, sends the wrong message.
Also through the chair, for a bit of context, I know this was raised by a submitter when I talked to them on the phone, and it actually was raised by an officer previously as well. If the responsible owner fee and the D6 dog fee also stack with one another, so if you get a $15 off your charge with your responsible owner, the answer according to the table that's used is yes. So the person will end up with a $60 registration fee if they're a responsible owner and have a D6 dog. So that's a really big incentive for those who are doing all of the what we've determined to be the right things. That's quite a big incentive to get those things done.
Thanks, Kenny. I mean, there's some great submissions, including the 4 that actually presented. Obviously, we're in a tiny nowhere really, obviously, and I mentioned earlier, and also Kevin clarified it very well, obviously, shifting a load, any discounting, differentiating, we're shifting a load from the action dog owner or the user of the service, like a dog owner or good licensing health. That's a deal, right? So shifting the decks really, cheers on the deck really.
Through the chair, obviously you are all able to make around this table, you're able to make the decision you wish to make on this particular matter, but in having the knowledge that yes, it will either shift more onto the general rate or puts more onto the user, or sort of retains the status quo, as it were, in the context of that we've got an LTP ongoing. Yes, if you did decide to change something and we found out later on through modelling that it is outside the revenue and financing policy, what that would mean is that likely you would be in a space where you'd have to amend the revenue and financing policy to then bring it back into compliance to reflect the significantly the additional amount going onto rates. So it is, you are able to do it, but make that decision with that context and with that information.
So we'll come to some of the line items I've got, and I'll come to you in a second, Duncan. Just one that sticks out to me, and I appreciate the comment you've made around if we increase the impounding fee to such an extent that it makes it unlikely or borderline impossible for people to go pick their dogs up. But I do note the sustenance and care fee, which wasn't changed, at $20 is upwards of 30% cheaper than a responsible dog owner who puts it in a dog park or care when they go on holiday.
Sounds like a plan.
Significantly cheaper. If we want to incentivize people to come get their dogs, then at the moment, council are providing care for dogs significantly cheaper than the commercial rates out in the community. And that for me would be one that I'll be looking at bumping that from $20 a day to $30 at least. And that would be in line with most other dog care facilities. Just a small point there. Duncan, you had a question?
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, just two comments / questions. One, I mean, I've been a dog owner. I mean, this registration fee and in the context of the overall cost of owning a dog is pretty small if you add up feeding them and let alone vet bills. And so, I mean, but it's interesting though. I mean, I'll just comment, I suppose. I mean, the timing of all this.
And sorry, microphone on for start. And do you have a question?
You know what? Well, I'm just the timing of all this. It's just unfortunate that I call it unfortunate, but describe it any other way. That we're getting submissions and the opportunity to do discounts, but we haven't got time to actually do that. That's sort of what we're. Sorry, wait till next year. I mean, I'm just wondering, has this not come up every year and we just end up pushing off? I mean, that's a question, I suppose. Did this come up last time?
Through the chair, I believe dog fees were not touched in terms of increases or decreases last time fees were reviewed. Dog registration fees and the animal control fees have actually not been touched significantly for about a decade. So you've had the same $73 to $75 charge for dog fees and the $80 fee for your general dog owners for quite some time. So you've got, if I recall correctly, it's about a 28% of inflation over the last decade that has never been captured in the fees until now. And that's why you've got this discrepancy with your pay band, with the bands for the fees and charges and the revenue and financing policy, as those natural increases over time have not been captured. So I don't believe that people raised all of these matters previously. However, we can check what previous submissions were raised and we can give those to you.
And to provide part of an answer to that as well, while the differentials that we've discussed are a best guess at from council staff to us, you are always, as a natural consequence of a submission process, get matters that you, even with the best intent, cannot anticipate. And you could argue, well, could we, should we, did we? But that's a what if discussion and not a what is. And the what is what's in front of us. And we've been given information and had submissions which are actually really quite compelling.
The dog parks and things would normally be considered all at the same time as a holistic picture. But right now we really don't have that opportunity. So it's either strike the fees ahead of LTP to make sure we meet those legislative deadlines in the control of dog, or it's you don't strike a fee and then you've got another year where then the revenue and financing policy is effectively broken and you're not collecting enough revenue from users, and more has to go on to rates. So it's as the councillors have raised, Bruce, it is a little bit of a hiding to this particular matter at this time, just given that disjointed nature.
So let me reflect that back to you to make sure that I've understood it. If we don't make a decision based on what we're presented with today, it kicks the can down the road to the long-term plan rates, and it's just going to increase that number. Yeah. Which is what John said earlier on.
Yeah. If you don't set fees for before the financial year and notify them, then you will be stuck with the existing fee structure for another full financial year for another dog registration year. That's correct.
Right, let's cut to the chase, and this is any other discussion. In terms of the scale, the spreadsheet we've been doing with the revised fees and charges there, my suggestion, or the only suggestion for change, is that under the sustenance and care fee, that we consider raising that. It's gone from 17 to 20. My suggestion is in line with what commercial dog care facilities are charging, which is significantly above that. We reconsider that and we bump that. My suggestion would be to $30, which is still relatively cheap. And it provides the incentive for people to go through the pound and get their dogs out.
Obviously, I would support that. Also, given getting back to responsible owner, the $75 one, we could just, as a matter of goodwill, or just accepting some of the submissions, goodwill, take that back to $70. The current one. Just do something. So there's no decrease overall on the actual fees and charges. The income.
So the suggestion would be to leave the responsible owner entire dog fee at its current rate of $70 rather than going to 75.
The only thing is, obviously, that may make a difference because they've got probably a lot more responsible owner dogs than there are the dogs in the sustenance and the care for pounds. So
the dilemma is that's going to throw us significantly further out of line with our revenue and finance policy, which we're already out of line with.
Just given my last comment, I think I was pretty correct that.
Look, I know it's a rock and a hard place. Yeah.
Yeah, a rock and a hard place. That's exactly where we're at. Question, do we have trouble getting people to pay to get their dogs out now? Like what percentage are we not able to retrieve?
As far as I couldn't give you a percentage off the top of my head. It'd be wrong to do so, but it is a significant issue because of when dogs come in, pound fees, etc. It is always going to be difficult for people. We do have that ability to recognise things like hardship, and ours do, I guess, get that information from people. And those people generally quite readily offer that information. So we will work with people where we can. Is it a problem getting the sustenance charged? I would say generally no.
Thank you.
But I guess one way of looking at it, and the risk of sounding callous, you get your car impounded and stored, you are not getting your car back till you pay the full fee. That's a lot more than what per day than what you charge for a dog in the pound.
The dog's not called Houdini. Your car's not called Houdini. How does this game on its own? I know exactly what Councillor Fletcher's talking about. I too had a Houdini dog who was beautifully fenced but could jump anything, including the hedge. So I relate completely to the Houdini dogs. I just wanted to ask in relation to Councillor the Deputy Mayor's suggestion, how long do dogs normally stay in the pound? How many days? Just generally, I mean,
General, probably if you averaged out mostly on the next day.
Yeah, so I'm not in agreement with the Deputy Mayor, what he's saying over there. You know, looking at going to doggy daycare is a completely different thing to going to the pound. I think $20 is perfectly okay, considering we're already whacking them for a reasonable amount. I just also wanted to ask another question for clarification. Councillor Park mentioned that 75% of the costs of dogs in the district is picked up in the rates. Is that correct?
The current approach is 74%. 74% of the, to be clear, the animal control activity holistically. So that's including picking up the dogs that aren't registered and picking up those that are. That holistically, yes, 74% of the cost of that entire activity, the staffing, the vehicles, the pound operation costs, all of that is through the uniform annual general charge.
Okay, so based on your response, Andrew, my view on things like discounts and gold card discounts and things like that, having been a hot gold card holder myself. No. I think that we do an absolutely fantastic job for animal control in this district, and the fact that we are asking people to pick up a fraction of the cost of it, I think these fees are reasonable and the sort of things that you take into account. You know, if you're paying $1 a week to register your dog and the council is picking up the rest of those costs, I mean, we have to impound horses and cows in our district. I think the fees are, yeah, and I'm actually not a fan of discounts, to be honest with you. I think the cost is the cost, and they're already doing very well out of council, and the rest of the ratepayers are acknowledging that there is something in terms of a public service. That's my view on it.
Well, you did, yeah, not to add too much more, but just, yeah, again, in the context of the cost of owning a dog, it's kind of small buckets, but yeah, and I wasn't sure about that ramping up the fee for the pound. I mean, it doesn't, yeah, it's like I say, I don't think it really compares to holiday park. Put them instead of that, instead of going to pay for the holiday park. But yeah, well, I mean, I'm just only aware of the unintended consequences that if someone can't pick up their dog for a week, it just makes it that much more difficult, and then they get dumped. I mean, but that's all I'm wary of if we make it any more than the $20.
That's fine. No support for that suggestion. That's
Yeah, I do.
yeah. Well, we're going to vote on this. The changes as they're presented, there's a number of them. So it's rather than just pull one item out and do that, show of hands, support for that suggestion. If there's no support, we'll leave it the way it is. If there is, then we can change it. So suggest we jump from 20 to 30. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Against 3. And on that basis, we'll bump it up. Excuse me, we will adjust it to $30 as the suggestion. We haven't discussed yet proposed food licensing fees. There's no recommended changes to what was put in there. Is there any discussion on this from anyone? Mr. Campbell.
Oh, interestingly, it was exactly related to point Rachel raised, was that 20 item, what was it, 20 cakes, is it, or 20 parties, or
20 cakes.
20 cakes. No, because I was wondering, how the heck do we know they're only doing 20 cakes? I mean, how does that
We monitor that.
There is no accurate way of reporting that.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
Yeah, those first 20 cakes, there's absolutely no regulations to me. You could be making that in the backyard and presenting it and selling it. It seems like a ridiculous sort of legislated figure they've pulled out of nowhere. It's quite a lot of, it's a big cost on small businesses. So as soon as they make 21 cakes, technically, they're in the same league as the big guns. And I see that as being really unfair, but I appreciate that's not our remit. But I mean, can we not push back on some of this because it's a bit ridiculous at times? My question.
And again, part of that submissions were around pushing back on this. These aren't our regulations or our legislation. This is nationally mandated. We have limited ability do anything about this.
I get that, but we can advocate and should when something doesn't make sense, and that doesn't make sense. Sorry.
Great. Any more discussion around the proposed food licensing fees?
What just people didn't feel so strongly to come in and submit today, they could have if they were really felt strongly enough.
Yeah, but I get that. Legitimate point, but I think we need to be careful that we don't attach undue weight to those who appear before us to negate the written submissions that people have taken the time and effort to submit. And the fact of a personal appearance is great, but just need to be careful how much weight you put on that.
Through the chair, all submissions legislatively are to be considered the same regardless of if someone appears before you or not.
Which is where I was going with that.
Should give
more
them
eloquently put.
due reference to all of the submitters.
Correct.
I just reflecting back to the dogs, page, Edge picked up here this morning, $35 full price on them registered and dogs unregistered for second or more pounding here 12 months, and the next line reflects the 29%, 23%, but that'll be changed in the action.
In the final document, you won't have those columns that have the difference. It'll just be the new fee. So that was an error on my part in terms of that 35, where it should be 45 and 29% rather than 23. But yes, in the final one, you won't have all those columns. It'll just be the new charge is $200 if you adopt.
The food licensing one is a very difficult one because it does impact on people's lives from a consumer's point of view. Just talk me through it. So a person can make 20 cakes or whatever for a year and they don't have to apply. And then they do have to apply to council for a...
Defer to Brian for the specifics. Yeah.
Right.
So the question relates to when the exemption cutoff.
Yes, and then what the process is after that.
So the exemption typically applies to home-based businesses, nor ordinarily. It's not usually applied to things like mobile shops and stuff like that. So hobbyists, essentially. And the idea is it's a non-commercial kind of activity. So if you're deemed to be exempt, then theoretically, when you start to become more of a commercial operation, you're required to register with us. So that would mean an online application with us, and obviously there's a fee for that. And then there would also be a verification, which is essentially inspection from us on that business.
And that's the one where you charge by the hour.
That has a set fee currently,
yeah.
And then if we go over the 2 hours allowed, then we have an hourly fee that's broken in 15 minutes.
So Mum can bake for the cake stall, and the people from the Māori Labour Weekend, they can bake for the cake stall out there. But then I see people advertising on Facebook pretty much every day, advertising food or what have you. How do I know that they are verified as licensed food sellers?
So we do monitor online sales quite closely in this district, unusually, not many councils do. And the majority of the ones we see on Facebook are actually registered. I would encourage most of them to actually put in their posts that they are a registered kitchen. But we can't require that. It's just a good idea. That being said, there's plenty of other people from outside of the district who can sell online, and we have no ability to regulate them other than confirm or report them perhaps to their own councils.
And just one further question, if you're not selling the food, if you're giving it away, does this sort of verification still apply?
No. So fundraising is exempt.
Yeah.
Small scale operations are exempt. No sale is exempt, but the common thing is that all people who trade in food are still responsible for its safety. So even if you're exempt, you're still responsible.
Well, that I was sort of thinking that, you know, the church soup kitchen type of situation. Yeah, so they don't have to, but obviously it's responsible. No. Thank you very much for that. response. Thank you.
Well, similar question to the dog owners. I mean, percentage of this covered by the ratepayer as opposed to the operators.
I'll have to pull up the
Oh.
previous table that we presented at the previous council report, but I can get that back to you.
Yeah, no, yeah.
quickly in terms of that number, that exact number in terms of percentage covered by the ratepayer. The issue for, particularly for food licensing, is it's inside of a broader compliance category, not just with food licensing, but with a few other categories. So that category is not as able to be, delineated like animal controllers, where it's quite a specific activity and significantly more ring fenced than the other compliance activities like health monitoring, food licensing, and there's one other as well, I believe, sat in that same portfolio. So the costs of that those activities are all pumped into one.
But it's certainly not 100% covered by the operators.
My understanding historically, I believe it was about 60-40. But which way around, I'm not too sure.
Okay.
So we're clear, and a number of the submissions talked about user pays. Happy to be corrected on this. There is nothing council does that is a strictly user pays regime. If the library was user pays, you would not be able to afford to borrow a book. The AC bars were user pays, no one would swim. The costs would be out of this world. So we are subsidising everything, as does central government, across the board. So I get it when people say this should be user pays, but if you take that argument to its end result, everything just crashes down around you. But you, comrade.
It was a little bit of it actually, because I was thinking, but anyway, I agree with you on that. Food licensing, because farmers markets and things like that they're selling it, aren't they? But it's the same with jams. You can make 20 jars of jam, but that doesn't go very far. And yeah, so I guess I just see it as a very unfair way of doing it. But yeah, I mean, I recognise that we're again stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Some further information for you might help. The MPI who oversee this can actually exempt any business for any reason, and typically people in that position who maybe don't want to go for commercial operation, who want to go more than 20 times a year, we would generally refer them for an MPI specific business exemption. It's about $170. It exempts them from requirements to be registered and verified. It's not a done deal. It's not a guaranteed outcome, but it is something, a good option for businesses who maybe don't think they fit, as a commercial business.
Thank you very much for that. I'm really glad I asked the question now. It's handy.
And just to follow on from Councillor Shepherd, so much I like what I was saying about the therapy dogs, and that there's a process through a GP, and like with the small business, home-based businesses or whatever they like to refer themselves to, can it be put back in the submission response that if you would like to apply for an exemption, go to the MPI website, can we give some sort of just additional alternative ways of skinning a cat, I suppose, to these people, because it's actually not just council that are doing it to them, and there may be other mechanisms just to show that we can help rather than and I'm sorry if it adds a little bit of work to whoever's doing that.
It's fine, because ultimately it benefits everybody if we're aware of these people and they're aware of their responsibilities. And certainly when we contact people via Facebook or whatever to do, we would outline it as an option for them.
Yes, but if we could also do it back to the submitters who have taken the time to well, that'd be great. Thank you.
Through the chair, to answer your question, Councillor Park, we can send that back through the return to the submitters, so we will inform them of what's deliberated and decided on today.
Yeah.
And as part of that, we'll include that in that email.
Thank you very much.
Also to answer Councillor Campbell's question around the split in the revenue and financing policy, it's a 35-45 onto the 35 to 45% on the general rate, 55 to 65% on fees and charges. And approximately right now it's 53 to 47. So 53% on the general rate, 47% on fees and charges, but that's for that holistic whole category, which includes liquor and health licensing more broadly, not just food.
Any other questions or discussion?
When were these last raised? How long have these fees been static?
Some of these fees last raised. Apologies. I'd have to go back to the previous LTP or annual plan and have a look if they were raised at that time.
Oh, but it's not. Well, it's not a decade. Like
Not the same as dog registration.
Yeah,
No.
right.
No.
Sorry, I just into that.
Thanks, Jason.
Any other discussion? Okay, so just to wrap it up, we'll have the resolution on the screen shortly. But just so we're clear, what we are voting on is to accept the proposed changes as amended in the agenda item to reflect the submissions that have come in. The discussion we've had around a number of different things that we could do in the future has been noted, and that will be brought back to us at a future date. So this is things around the dog obedience school, differentials for gold card holders, age of dogs, which I know was one of the other things, and small dogs. There's a whole range of different things that we can do there. Also, I note in the submissions, particularly around the food licensing fees, there was what can we do for new businesses, of some submissions on that. So these are matters that can come back at a future date prior to us discussing any further adjustment to this, not this year, but further down the track.
Oh, just to correct you, I think we were told we can't, on the basis of the dog, can't adjust the fees, age and size. That would be right.
There's some limitations, but in terms of bringing that back to council, next time we would come back to council with a new fees schedule and discuss these items. That would be highlighted that that's something that you may not be able to do through a paper to council.
I think what we're saying is that the ideas that have been brought up at this table can be reflected in next year's workshop when we look at the next round of fees. But in terms of this set of fees for the 24-25 year, we're limited in what changes.
Yeah, and just so we reflect some of the innovative suggestions that we've received from submissions, and we don't just gloss over them and leave them sitting on the table. So that's the recommendation we've got. Quick read of that. Over mover. Park seconder. That's Williamson. Put to the vote. All in favour? Against? Passed. Thanks, team, for your work on that. Conscious that the number of submissions we've had on other things, still a lot of work to pull it all together, to summarise it and to make the changes and present it to us. Please pass our thanks on to the team who have done that behind the scenes. Does not go unnoticed.
Yeah.
I was going to say, doesn't make the decision making easy, but it certainly helps simplify the process. It's still not a simple or easy decision because we're impacting people's ability to pay in a lot of cases. Right. No other matters for the meeting. Karen, if I get you to close with a thanks everyone.